Hey everyone, and welcome to Hitherin Yawn, live with Abner, author of The Legend of Pedestrio. We're coming to you live from Brattleboro, Vermont, on day seven of Abner's 6-month walk across the United States to promote the book and tell stories. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes or so chatting to Abner about what it took to write the book, what he's actually doing over the next 6 months, what it's been like so far, what he's looking forward to, some of the fun stories. And then we're going to take audience questions. So feel free to drop your questions into the chat and I will pick those up. So, Abner.
Hi.
How you doing?
Hi, folks.
How you doing? And tell us about what you're up to.
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. As you said, I am walking across the United States and Canada to promote my new book, a novel called The Legend of Pedestrio, which just released on May 1st. This is backwards, but you get the idea. And The Legend of Pedestrio is, briefly speaking, a campfire yarn about the search for a million-year-old man who walks the earth by day and the sky at night. And it's kind of a mixed genre thing. It's mostly humor. It's a little bit fantasy. It's got quite a bit of tall tale in it. It's kind of, if you're familiar with the children's book, The Phantom Toll Booth, imagine The Phantom Toll Booth written for grown-ups as embellished by Mark Twain. That's the way I like to describe it.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
And since the major theme of the book is walking, I thought it was only appropriate to do the book tour on foot.
Now that's 6 months. You just kicked off last Sunday. You're here in Brattleboro, which is about 100 and something miles. How long is the complete trip, and what's the rough sort of journey pathway?
Well, there's always going to be some variation, but I reckon it's about 3,300 miles from the East Coast, Quincy, Massachusetts, to the Redwoods of California in Crescent City. And the route, I expect to be sticking to a more or less northern route this time. From Massachusetts, I headed a little bit north into New Hampshire and Vermont. I'll be heading into upstate New York in a few days. And from there, I expect to cross into southern Ontario at Niagara Falls, spend a couple of weeks in Ontario, and then come out into the United States again in Michigan. Pretty much, see, here's the problem. Lake Michigan is in the way of where I want to go. And if I go north of Lake Michigan, well, I'm going to have to find a way across the Great Lakes at some point, and there's just no really good walking route. The only good walking route around Lake Michigan is to the south, and the problem is Chicago, which is right at the southern tip of Lake Michigan. I've walked through southern Chicago before. I don't really relish doing it again. So the idea is just to take a steamship across Lake Michigan from Ludington to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and then continue the journey from there. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Oregon, and then the very far northern tip of California.
Okay, so we know why you started in Quincy. That's where you are living. Why are you finishing in Northern California, and where specifically? Why specifically?
Well, I've never seen the redwood forest, and so it just it seemed fitting to me. This is a book about the outdoors and the wonders and mystery of nature, and redwood trees to me, never having seen any, are just mysterious creatures. And I've always wanted to be introduced to them, so this seemed like a good idea. Why there and not someplace else on the West Coast? Towards in October anyway, I'm going to start to run into issues related to the weather. And I am aware of the fact that an early snowstorm could block the passes in the Rocky Mountains or even the mountain ranges further west at any time. So once I hit Wyoming and the Rocky Mountain Range, I aim to start angling a little bit south just to see if I can beat the weather to the West Coast.
So that's a lot of days walking. It's a lot of miles, and there's also some nights in there. How are you? Are you camping? Are you going in hotels? How are you doing it? What have you done so far in the 7 days?
Well, so far I've been pretty lucky in that I have had some friends who the first couple of nights who were willing to put me up. The first night I stayed in Arlington at a friend's house, and I was fortunate to have the opportunity to sing for my supper, to perform some tales for them in exchange for dinner and a place to sleep. And the second night, I spent the night at another friend's house in Westford, Massachusetts. There was a hockey game on, and there was no chance they were going to stop watching the hockey game to watch me perform. So I didn't tell stories that night. But the next day, I had a 1 o'clock appointment performance scheduled just 10 miles up the road in Groton, Massachusetts. And my host was able to come to that performance. So I got to share some of my stories with her then. As for the other nights, it's a mixture of camping out and spending the night in inns or B&Bs or whatever. I spent a couple of nights out camping out in the woods, and I've spent a couple of nights indoors. And for the rest of the journey, I expect to spend maybe 3 nights a week indoors and the rest of the time camping out.
So camping means that you're carrying gear. What does your backpack weigh? What has it got in it?
I don't know exactly how much it weighs. I reckon maybe 30 to 35 pounds, depending on how much food and water I'm carrying. But I try to go light to the extent that I can. I don't carry a tent. Tents, when you're, this is basically a road trip. It's not out in the woods somewhere away from traffic. It's along the corridors where people are traveling. And when you're doing that, you want to keep a low profile. And tents are a lot more easy to spot out there in the woods than just a sleeping bag on the ground. So I have a sleeping bag. I have a waterproof shell that I can sort of put my sleeping bag in case it rains. I also have a poncho that I can use as a tarp, which I did a couple of nights ago when there was just a drizzle and I wanted to keep that off me.
Rachel in the chat wants to know, what do you eat when you're camping?
When you're camping, you'd bring a lot of dried foods. I like the packaged noodles where you just boil some water and dump the package in and heat it up that way. Little packets of instant porridge or oatmeal that you can just dump in and heat up. But one of the advantages of road walking is there's always another town a few miles down the road, so you don't have to carry too much food. You know, you can always restock, and or worst, you can pick up a sandwich or something to tide you over until you hit the next town.
And that must be quite a major difference between this sort of walking, road walking, and the other sort of hiking that you do, trail walking. The amount of equipment you need to bring and the water you need to carry. What are some of the other differences? between the two sorts of walking? Because you did a big walk recently in rather different circumstances.
I did. I did 5 or 6 days of the Arizona Trail in Arizona. I did part of the Superstition Wilderness and a couple of other sections, along with a friend who was hiking the entire trail, and she just wanted sometimes when you're out in remote regions like that, it's a lot easier to have a buddy hiker. So I did one leg of that trip with her, and she had other people to do other legs. Well, some of the differences are some of the places that you can hike out in the woods are pretty remote. So like you said, you have to carry what you need. You have to carry enough food to get you through. You have to make sure you know where the water sources are. And you usually have to have some way to purify the water, whether that's a filter or little iodine tablets or whatever. Or you could boil it, but that takes stove fuel, so you have to carry a little bit extra stove fuel if you want to go that way.
So on the road walking, you're coming to towns all the time. You can refill. Okay, that sounds a lot easier to me.
In some respects, it's a lot easier. You also have to be mindful of the traffic. Some roads have a nice shoulder you can walk on, and some of them have almost no shoulder at all. So you just have to be mindful. You always walk facing traffic, unless it's just so much more obvious that it's far safer on the other side of the road. You walk facing traffic and you listen to what's coming up behind you. A couple of days ago, I had some Yahoo who decided it was a good idea to pass another car coming up behind me when I couldn't see behind me, and I didn't know he was racing past me. Never do that, folks. Never try to pass another car when there's a pedestrian on the left-hand side of the road, because you don't know what that pedestrian is going to do next. I have not here, not in New England, but out in the West, I have had rattlesnakes buzz me while I was walking by the side of the road, and I jumped to the center of the road just as fast as I could, never even thinking that somebody might be in the wrong lane coming towards me. So just never, ever pass when there's a pedestrian on the other side of the road.
Now, in terms of keeping safe, there are people out there with your well-being in mind. Tell us about your being buzzed by the fuzz.
Buzzed by the fuzz. A police officer, let's call them by the rightful term. It was early in the morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning in Ashby, Massachusetts, just before I got to the New Hampshire border. I had a police cruiser come by me kind of slowly, driving past me, and then turned around and came back the other way. And the officer called me over to his side of the road. I assumed it was going to be, he was going to check my ID, make sure I wasn't up to no good. But when I pulled out my wallet, he said he didn't need to see my ID. He just wanted to know what I was doing. He thought I was ex-military or something because of the backpack I was carrying. But when I told him what I was doing, that I was walking across the country to promote this book, he was genuinely interested. And since I already had my wallet out, I pulled out one of the little business cards I carry that tells a little bit more about the project and the book and how people can find out more. And he asked if he could keep the card. He said he would be following my progress. He asked if I needed any water or if I wanted a ride or anything. And I didn't need any of that stuff, but I was really grateful for his support. And that interaction really carried me. I felt like I was walking on air for the next 6 or 7 miles.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Part of the beauty of being on the road clearly is it takes longer to pass things, and that includes people. I guess you get into some really interesting conversations with people in shops and in other places en route? Are people generally interested?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. A lot of times when people see my pack, they see something that they can identify with. Somebody has the same kind of pack, or somebody has a backpacking trip coming up in August, and you get to strike up a conversation that way. Other people are just, you know, they have their own life, and you know, they're just there to serve you. So it's a mix, but I have made some wonderful contacts with people along the way. Yes.
Excellent. Now, some of the challenges again in walking long distances must be sort of wear and tear on your body. You must get tired. You're doing 20 or so miles a day. What's that been like? Especially, I imagine when it's pouring with rain, it's not very pleasant.
No, and today, as you mentioned, this is day 7. This is actually a rest day for me here in Brattleboro. I haven't moved an inch. Mm-hmm. But a few days ago, the same day that the police officer called me over, it was supposed to be raining all day. And it did start raining just a few minutes after I talked to the officer. And it wasn't a hard rain or driving rain or pouring rain, but it was drizzly all day long. But I kept on having these wonderful encounters with people along the way, people in cafes or restaurants or like I said, the police officer. And they just kept pulling me on. Plus the fact that when you're walking in the rain, there's just no place dry to sit down and rest. So I just kept going and going, walking in wet shoes and socks, and I probably overdid it a little bit that day. Went a few more miles than I should have, and I ended up getting blisters for the first time in maybe 35 years of wandering. So I have been dealing with that the last few days. I'm fairly certain that by the time I set out again tomorrow morning, I will be well enough that they won't be bothering me.
And where are you headed to tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I'm fetching up somewhere in the vicinity of Wilmington, Vermont. It's roughly halfway between Brattleboro and Bennington. And I expect to be camping out tomorrow night, so I'm not ending up in Wilmington, but somewhere in that vicinity.
Excellent. Now, this blog is called Hitherin, Yawn. Great play on words there. And how are you updating it while you're on the road? And what challenges has that process caused you?
Well, it's a lot easier to do when you're inside and have easy internet connection and enough power to keep your phone going. So when you're out in the woods, it just makes everything a little more difficult. But so far, I've managed to keep it updated either every day or as soon as I could the next day.
Lisa in the chat wants to know whether anyone is walking with you, or are you doing the whole thing solo and planning to do the whole thing solo?
I am planning to do the whole thing solo. I have been fortunate enough to have Kirsten as an occasional support driver this first week, but I don't expect that to continue. Kirsten has her own things to do, and we will meet up periodically along the way, but I think my days of slack packing are coming to an end.
So where can people find out more about your route, your specific route, so that they could maybe help identify places for you to perform, or friends, family, etc., who might be able to offer you a bed for the night? Sure.
My website, abnerserd.com. Serd is S-E-R-D. has those details. There is a map that covers the first half of the journey right there on the home page, and you just go down to that map. It's a Google map, which means you can zoom in and see the specific route that I am expecting to take. And Google doesn't do very well with ferries across Lake Michigan, so I couldn't map out the entire route, but as soon as I get an opportunity, I will create a second map from Manitowoc, Wisconsin out to Crescent City, California.
Fantastic. Your Facebook handle is Abner, slightly different from your Twitter account and your website. So Abner on Facebook. We will look forward to having another Abner live with Hitherin Yawn on his Hitherin Yawn blog in about a month's time, just before he hits Niagara Falls. And we look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, good luck, happy feet.
Thank you.
And happy adventures. Bye, everyone.